American Dad Podcast.
Yeah, boy.
I am a real American, fight for the rights of every man. I am a real American, fight for what's right, fight for your life.
What's going on, everybody? This is Andrew with the American Dad Podcast, coming to you live, recorded, something like that, from Washington State. How are you doing? It has been a whole 10 minutes since my last recording, and this hopefully will be released on the 1-year anniversary of the American Dad Podcast. So, thank you guys all for listening for the year. I appreciate it. I hope there's many more years to come for the American Dad Podcast, where we discuss kids, being a dad, being a parent, husband-wife relationships, all that kind of good stuff. Anyways, this episode is brought to you by Audible. Get your free book on audible.com by visiting audibletrial.com/American Dad Podcast. You'll get yourself a free book, and you just go ahead and cancel after you get your free book. If you don't want the service, I get 2 books a month at the moment. Probably can't keep up with that. As I'm saying that, I was on a roll. I was going through book after book, and then I got, oh boy, now I can't remember the name of it. Anyways, I got a book that was really big, and it's taken me a while to finish. And so now I have to really truck through or kind of split between books. Game of Thrones, that's what it was. I had to, that's the app if you guys want to check it out. I'm showing it on the video here. So if I want to play it, yeah, you guys have heard this before. But yeah, check it out, audible.com. I don't think you're going to get Game of Thrones for free. I don't know if they allow that. That book is like ginormous, but who knows? It might be if you're into that kind of stuff. All right. One of the things I forgot to mention on the last episode is I have partnered up with Adventure Amigos. You guys have probably heard me mention them, quite a few podcasts back. They're basically they've gotten really big. I think they've been, what is it? Adventure Amigos they talk about like technology, and they talk about movies, and they have all kinds of podcasts. They have like a conspiracy theory podcast. So I'll just give you a kind of quick lineup of their podcasts. I don't listen to all of them. I've heard Big Show Thursday, and I've heard Tinfoil Happy Hour. I'm not a big metalhead, but they got Midnight Metal Mayhem. That's a podcast. Spoder to Spoder, Rock Zone, Amigo Radio Update. So they got all these different shows, and I'm going to be in the lineup with their shows too. So I would definitely check them out. AdventureAmigos.net. Just go ahead and check them out. If you're into movies, check out the reviews. Some very intelligent, smart guys in this network. And plenty of stuff to read and check out. Get all the game reviews. Listen, I'm into gaming. I'm 30-something, and I still enjoy video games from time to time. And I think even as you get to that point where you probably pause and don't play as much as you used to when you're a teenager or in your early 20s. I played a lot when I was in the Army, as that's what me and my buddies did on our off time for fun. We're kind of nerdy that way. And then I get to relive this again because now my son, he's very involved in video games, and so I get to play them with him, and so we get to play these video games together and laugh and joke and compete against each other. But yeah, so check them out. They got all kinds of cool. They got reviews and news, and they talk about beer. They got they got more stuff than I could write about all by myself. That's why they have a team behind it. So check it out. And if you comment on anything, let them know that you heard about them on the American Dad Podcast. I would appreciate it. So, we got to talking about some things that happened this week recently. One of the things I want to tell you about is, I want to talk about school and dressing up for Halloween. Now, when I was a kid, we did it. And I think when I was like kindergarten, first grade, growing up in Pittsburgh, California, they had like, what do they call them? They kind of parade you out in your costume and you do like a little, I don't know, you just walk around the yard of the school and parents would come to see all the kids dressed up. And so they did that from time to time. I only have a few memories of that in my earlier years of life, and I don't know whether I dressed up very much after that. I don't know what the school made a big deal about it, but I know that in different districts in California that they're still doing it. The kids all dress up, they parade around, parents come out to watch. It's a big to-do, and it's fun. The kids have fun doing it. Well, I was talking to my daughter about it, and they're not doing it in our school district this year. And I don't think they did it in their last year, but I don't know if I really cared if I hit back then. But the only reason I thought about it today was because a parent came up to me because my son's kindergarten teacher was kind of dressed up a little bit, not like into anything particular, but she was wearing like I don't know, like a spider thingy cape and a little spider hat, and she had a little. They were learning about words, so she incorporated what she was wearing into the words that they were learning, and the letters. And they were talking about S's, so she called the candy bowl a soup bowl, and the spider was dangling from her neck, so it was S. So that she was teaching it that way, right? But the very observant parent comes up to me as we're walking away from the school. We dropped off the kids, and he says, she's a bold teacher. I said, what are you talking about? He's like, well, she's kind of dressing up, and the school district doesn't allow it. And I said, yeah, but it's not a big deal. He's like, no, I don't. He's like, I don't care either. He just says, I just find it interesting that this is the only school district that doesn't allow it. And I go, well, why do you think that is? And he says, well, I think it's because of certain religions might not participate, and they didn't want to cause any problems or something. That was his theory. And I said, well, there's also the theory of, not every kid can afford to dress up. Not every kid participates maybe for and other reasons. And again, you don't want to leave kids out. And, I don't know that. I mean, I think we're more sensitive of parents in many ways now these days. I mean, I think back when I was a kid, it would be like, oh, you don't have to dress up. It's not a big deal. And yeah, the kid might kind of feel out of place a little bit, but the next day happens and he's over it. He's not there's only Halloween one day of the year, but so I just thought, two interesting theories. I don't know if all school districts do this, but I think it's an interesting, discussion of, to have it or don't have it, or, is the few parents that might not like it, is it worth, taking away the fun from all the other kids? It's not a big deal for me. I mean, it's not the end of the world if my kids don't dress up for school. I think it's a fun activity for them to do, and everybody gets to kind of see what they're going to be wearing that night if they decide to participate in trick or treat. As for like in regards to like religion and stuff related to Halloween, I know that a lot of Christians frown on this holiday. Obviously, they think it's demonic or something. And, I actually thought about that as me and my wife were raising, my daughter was the first one born, and we kind of talked about it, but I think it's kind of like the way you celebrate this, I don't know, what do you want to call it? Holiday, right? How do you celebrate it? Like when we go and get our pumpkins, we don't think of it in any other way than, hey, we're going to get a pumpkin and then we're going to carve this out to make it look fun, right? We might make him have sharp teeth like Dracula, or we might make him happy or whatever. But it's not. We don't really talk about any other reason why we're doing the pumpkin. It's just kind of what we do. It's kind of like a tradition, right? And as for dressing up, there's. I don't think. I just think it's something for more of the imagination for the kid, right? Like they get to be Iron Man this year, right? Or they get to dress up as a zombie or whatever. But it's fun. It's a little bit of fantasy. It kind of can stimulate the imagination a little bit. I mean, unless you focus on something negative on this holiday, if you talk about it. I mean, I don't talk to my kids about stuff like that in regards to the origins of Halloween. I don't care. They don't need to care about that because that's not why we do what we do. You know, it's just this fun tradition that, you know, the United States participates in. Most of the United States, I would have to assume. You know, you go out and you get your candy at night and you get to dress up for fun and it's fun to see other people walking around in different, you know, costumes and how creative did they make their costumes. So, I mean, I don't know. I mean, I think sometimes, I don't know, government entities, maybe school districts, are a little bit overreactive to maybe a handful of parents or concerns, you know, when the overwhelming majority would just basically be like, yeah, what's the big deal? You know, if you don't participate, you don't participate, but don't, like, if I didn't want my kids to, dress up for Halloween or to dress up at school, I'm not going to take it down from the entire school. I mean, that's something that I'm imposing on my children. That's something that I've talked to them about. And that, you know, hey, for these reasons, I don't want you to participate. I don't want you to feel bad about it, but this is just my concerns about it or whatever. So I wouldn't ruin it for everybody. I would just ruin it for my kids, I guess, right? I just, sorry, kids, you got a crappy dad. But that's not the case. My kids are dressing up. But I just don't know. I'm sure there's some other school districts out there that are doing the same thing. I never really got a, I don't really have an opinion about it because, you know, if my kids didn't do it one way or the other, it didn't matter. But, you know, I don't know. I'm going to have to dig into more to find out what the real reason is for them taking that away. Something else that went down recently is Veggie Races 2013. It's something that my kids at their school, they do. It was created by a couple of dads, very involved dads. Whenever you see these dads, they are always at field trips or participating in the school and stand-up guys. And so they did Veggie Races last year. We just, for some reason, our schedules didn't work out to where we did it. So this year we did it. My wife went to the store and basically, in the Veggie Races, you have to make it's almost like a slot car. It could be bigger, but it's got to fit into the dimensions of this little downhill track. And it's got to be made entirely out of vegetables, minus like the axle. You can get like a shish kebab skewer stick, whatever, and stick it in for the axle so the wheels can stay on. But that's basically it. And some toothpicks, basically toothpicks and vegetables. So, you know, I get home from work. And wife brings some of the vegetables. We got some, cucumbers and carrots. That was my big vision, right? A cucumber for the whole of the car, and we had carrots, which I envisioned being wheels. And so I basically, I think I had my daughter like cut up some carrots, and we kind of designed it what I was going to do. Nothing major, right? Because I only have like 2 ingredients that I'm building this thing with. And so I, finally finished my sons and my daughters, and it was just like I said, it's the carrots for the wheels, and we got the cucumber for the body. The wheels, the carrot wheels spin pretty good. I'm very confident about this vehicle. Now, it's not the ugliest thing, but I wanted it to be. It's not the prettiest thing. It was the ugliest thing. It wasn't pretty at all. But I didn't expect much from any other parent out there or kids. I just expect them to make this vegetable racer. I just thought the concern would be win the race. And, and I've mentioned before, the parents the parents are out of control with participating. I love it, right? Because we get there and this race is being held in a cafeteria, and behind it, they got this like, oh boy, can't think of it, like the tournament chart, right? Where they list everybody's name, and all the kids would walk up and they named their vehicle, they named it whatever, and the dads would write up on the tournament chart, the bracket. That's the word I was thinking of this whole time. And all these parents were there, and if their parents didn't make one at home, they had plenty of vegetables there that they could, build one before the race started. So these parents that either didn't have time or just decided to go that day were vigorously building these race cars for their kids, and kids are. But here's the thing: we had the lamest veggie racer out there. And hopefully I can post a picture in the video here for this podcast. there were the most inventive, dangerous-looking veggie racers out there. These guys were taking these long shish kebab, skewer wooden ones, and they're poking them in the front. They have all these spikes coming out, and I'm just thinking, that's going to poke someone in the eye. I'm like, telling him, get away from the guy's car. He's going to poke you. He's not paying attention. I'm all anal dad. Must have been 50, 60 kids there, plus adults, plus parents. Huge. I mean, they had to build an additional bracket because they didn't have enough space on the original, so they built the additional one. Eventually the race started, and they're just the most creative looking. Some of them just weren't going to win, but they could have been on a float. They could have been a veggie float. And so, we waited and the bracket happened, and up for the first race, it was my son started, and he was racing a very fancy looking car. Hopefully I'll have the picture up here, because I was rolling video. And, the race happens, and, I mean, he loses by the smallest of margins. Listen, the engineering was sound. I'm not an engineer. I probably should have called upon my engineering friend who's got a degree in it. But I felt that the dynamics of the veg vehicle that I created was, should have won. But after seeing all the other creations, I realized there are much more vegetables out there than cucumbers and carrots, and that would probably be better, faster, like the $6 million man, right? Anyways, so he lost, but it didn't matter. He got, he sat down after I took his car from him or whatever, and he sat down and continued to watch all these races, and the kids just loved it. And then my daughter went up, and again, she's racing some fancy vehicle, and again, loses by the slightest of margins. Again, the engineering was exactly the same as my son's, but I was hoping for a different result, hoping that the car that she was racing would be slower. Unfortunately, it was not. But we ended up getting out of there. It was on a Friday, and we ended up getting out of there after we both lost. And they had a good time. It was movie night, so I think we watched movies after that. But if you haven't thought about it, maybe if you guys are involved in PTA or you guys are just looking for a fun project to do, make a veggie racer. Because like these ramps, it's like a slot car ramp. Basically there's a line in the middle, the two cars on each side, and they go at it. Some just fell apart before they even made it to the bottom, but it was hilarious. So my final thing here, by the way, I'm hoping to post this one on the anniversary date of the American Dad podcast, 1 year in broadcasting excellence, and I'm glad you guys are still listening. Again, if you guys are wondering what this podcast is about, it's for dads, moms, not kids. Kids, we talk about kids. We talk about relationships. We talk about raising our kids. And if you guys have topics for me, feel free to reach out at the American Dad Podcast website. Contact me on the contact page. Make it as easy as possible for you. So something even more interesting, more fascinating, more controversial than anything happened to me this past month. And you're like, what can this be? Well, my daughter usually comes home with things, from school. And sometimes it's like soccer signups and art classes. And I think recently they had cheerleading signups for elementary school. I don't know when that started. I don't know when they started doing that in elementary school. But she came home with a sign-up sheet for wrestling, high school type of wrestling, not WWF. And let me give you a little backstory here. I played football in high school, and I wrestled in high school. And my football adventure was quite shorter than my wrestling. I did football for JV, and I did about a month of football in my junior year, and then I quit after that. I realized that I didn't like team sports like that. I wasn't built for that. I wasn't mentally built for that, or I don't know, maybe physically. I was a lineman, and I wasn't big enough. I was very slim. But I also wrestled, and I wrestled in fifth grade originally, way back when in life, and that was because I met a guy who I had a friend. One of my best friends back then was a very good wrestler, And then I also that I started wrestling again in my sophomore year, and wrestled throughout my senior year. And then I went to junior college and wrestled there, and that was basically the end of it. I had a little small stint of practicing in the Army, but nothing major. So I love wrestling, and one of the reasons I love it is because it's an individual sport. And when it becomes to like when you're wrestling for position, whether you're a JV guy or you're wrestling junior varsity or you're wrestling varsity, you decide as a wrestler whether you're going to be good enough. That means you got to practice. You have to beat that other guy. Nobody's telling you, Andrew, you're starting, or Andrew, you're not starting. And that was one of the best things I liked about it, is I was controlling my destiny. So anyways, back up. Now that you know I love wrestling, right? I have a nephew that wrestled. He's in elementary school, and I have another nephew that's much older that I tried to convince to doing it, and he just was not interested in wrestling around with guys. That's fair. That's fair. He played football and he played basketball. For some reason, that kind of sport didn't interest him. So my daughter shows my wife this sign-up sheet for wrestling, and she says, and I can hear them talking. I'm watching TV, but I can hear them talking. And she says something to the effect of, "Mom, are girls allowed to wrestle?" And my wife, I think she didn't know how to answer it off the bat, but she says, "Well, technically they can wrestle." And she's like, "Can I wrestle?" And I think my wife said something to the effect of, "Go ask your father." And she comes up to me with this grin like, "Dad, can I wrestle?" And I'm like, "Are you sure you want to wrestle?" She's like, "Yes." I go, "You realize it's kind of a rough sport, and there's, you could get hurt a little bit, and, it's this and that." And she's like, "Yeah, I'm okay with that." I'm like, "Oh, my daughter, you're killing me." And listen, let me back up a little bit even more. When I was in high school, I from what I understand, because this is how it was kind of seemed in my brain, was women wrestling was just starting to take off. We had a freestyle women's girls team, and I started seeing women's wrestling start to evolve. Now it's been a very slow progression from what I understand. It's not. I mean, it isn't to the popularity where if you walked into high school, there was 30 girls trying to wrestle and 30 boys, right? It's still more boys wrestle than girls. So this wasn't something I wasn't accustomed to seeing. And I'll be honest with you, I just didn't expect my daughter, even though she's just a go-getter, right? She just cracks me up. But so she's just, she wants to wrestle. I'm like, "Well, if you really want to wrestle, we'll sign you up." And she's just ecstatic about that. But I didn't want to be the dad, right? Like, I wasn't going to tell my daughter, I mean, especially if it wasn't against the rules or anything, like, "No, you can't do that." I didn't want to be that dad. I mean, I want my daughter to figure out, I didn't want to control her to the extent of being like, "Okay, well, you can only do this. You can only be a cheerleader, and that's all you can be. Or, you can only play softball." She might do wrestling for this year or two, and she might decide she doesn't like it. If she decides she loves it, I'm still going to support her. I guess I never really sat down and thought about my daughter, wrestling. But the funny thing was, so we got my daughter that's gung-ho about it. And then I go to my son and I go, "Son, do you want to wrestle?" And he's like, "No." I'm like, "What are you talking about? You don't want to wrestle?" And he's like, no, that's dangerous." I'm like, "Well, it's not that dangerous." I go, "I wrestled, son, and he's like, "No." I go, "Son, you realize that it's not like the stuff on TV," because we watch WWE. He watches a lot of ladder matches, and we have the WWE wrestling game on the Xbox, which we play together. And I go, there's none of that, right?" And he's like, "Yeah, I know. And it's bullcrap. He still was thinking like it was. And I go, "Son, listen, you can't, I go, it's not like that. I'll be there to help you. I'm going to teach you, because he's saying he didn't know how to do it. And I go, I'm going to teach you. I used to do it. Then I took him into my office and I turned on YouTube and, Googled YouTubed 5-year-old wrestling. And then showed him videos of 5-year-olds, wrestling, and, trying to show him that this is what it's going to be like. And he was like, no, I don't want to do that. I don't want to get hurt. It's dangerous. And I kept trying to reassure him. So, and listen, I didn't convince him to wrestle by the end of the night. I mean, I think I had an hour or 45 minutes to do so, but the wrestling was the following day. That's when it started. And so I put him to bed and I'm like, Carter, and I'm like, we had said our prayers and we were just talking. I said, so are you sure you don't want to wrestle? And he's like, yeah, I don't want to get hurt. I go, son, I'm going to help you with this. I'm going to teach you. I will be there at your practices. And I go, I tell you what, son, I go, let's not even talk. We'll talk about it in the morning. Okay. We'll talk about it again. You think about it tonight. You think about it. And we'll talk about it in the morning. He's like, okay, Dad, we'll talk about it in the morning. So I went and said goodnight to my daughter, and we said our prayers to her. And then as I'm walking out to head back downstairs, Carter he asked me for a hug or something. I gave him a hug, and I go, and I mentioned something about wrestling again. He's like, Dad, let's just talk about it tomorrow. Let's just talk about it tomorrow. I said, okay, son, we'll talk about it tomorrow. So the next morning came. And actually, I didn't mention it in the morning. I was, getting the kids' lunches ready and getting ready myself, and so whatever they go to school, and as I'm picking up my son and daughter from class, I get my son first, and he's like, "So, Dad, did you know that so and so?" He named off a friend of his. Do you know that he wrestles? But he doesn't have to sign up. He just already wrestles. I'm like, really? He's like, yeah. So are we going tonight, Dad? I said, yeah. Do you want to wrestle now? He's like, yeah, I want to wrestle. You got to teach me though. I go, yeah, I'll teach you. And he's like, okay. And I don't know what happened in between then and, when I started trying to convince him, it might have been because his classmate was a wrestler, or I don't know, maybe I don't know. Needless to say, I'll talk about more about the wrestling down the road, but, I'll ask you, I mean, if your daughter wanted to wrestle, would you say okay? I mean, is that something you let her do? Would you let her figure out if that's something she wanted to do? Because my daughter's all over the place with things and she's committed to them. Don't get me wrong. She's not like, oh, I like this today and I like this, something different tomorrow. So she likes soccer. If we put her in soccer again this year, she'd be just as happy with that. But she's interested in everything. I wasn't that way as a kid. I think it's just fascinating how kids are so different. Even if you compare them to yourself, I was very happy wrestling. I was very happy doing karate. And I enjoyed darts as I got older. But I didn't think soccer looked like a lot of fun. I looked like a lot of running, and you get to kick the ball once in a while, and the scoring was really low. So that was really boring to me. Or, I didn't start to like golf until I was an adult because it was more of a slower paced thing. But a lot of my friends, I should say, not all of them, but enjoyed golf. And I just thought it was a silly thing at the beginning. Like, okay, so you just hit that ball and you got to try to hit that little hole. I don't know, whatever. Golf's fine to me now. I think that golf is great now. I don't golf that much, but I get it now. I get why people can like it. It's interesting. I'm not a fanatic about it, but I get it. So yeah, I mean, I don't know. I'm interested to see how this will evolve with both the kids, with my son and daughter, and I'll definitely report on it in the future, in the near future, probably in an upcoming podcast or something to kind of catch you up on what's gone on since we started. We're about 3 weeks into it now, and so I'll let you know on an upcoming thing, but. Yeah, and let me ask you this. So now let me ask you, if your son wanted to be a cheerleader, would you allow it? I don't know if I would. I'd be honest with you. I know guys that are cheerleaders, and that's great. I mean, I used to help out with that kind of stuff with the youth groups and youth leagues and stuff. I don't know. I'd probably try to adamantly talk my son out of it. I'd probably try to get him into some sports, but then again, as I'm thinking about it, maybe I would be like, okay, and just be supportive. Is there anything that you guys out there would be like, no, I do not want you to participate in that? And I'm regarding like some kind of sport or something. Let me know. I'd be interested to hear your thoughts on that. I can't really think of anything off the hand that I would just be so adamant about. Like, no, you cannot do that sport. And I'm talking like youth or high school, stuff like that. What else here? Yeah, 1 year. Very stoked about that. I just didn't realize it creeped up so fast. Well, this is the conclusion of the American Dad podcast. Thank you guys for listening for a year. Thank you guys that's been hanging strong with it. And if you guys have any suggestions for future episodes, feel free to ask. Also, check out Adventure Amigos at adventureamigos.net. Go check out Amigo Land. They've got plenty of podcasts to check out if you are lacking in some podcasts. It's a good one. There's some good ones on there to add. And they also do shows live, so that's another thing to consider with, I can't think of the app. I'll have to tell you next time. And that's about it. So be sure to check out overprotectiveparents.net. That's the blog that I write on frequently, and americandadpodcast.com. That's where you can watch the videos, or you can go to YouTube and just type in American Dad Podcast. You can watch the podcast. And, I don't necessarily like watching people podcasts, but if you're looking to see the pictures or see infographics or info, stuff on the screen while I'm podcasting, I wouldn't want to just sit here and stare at myself either. And if you want to see some of the stuff that I posted up there, feel free to check that out. Again, this is the American Dad Podcast, and I am Andrew, your host. So, without further ado, let me get you out of here. All right, you parents, fathers, mothers, you guys have a great day, and thank a veteran. Peace out.